Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the Hindu newspaper dated 25th January 2018. Let's begin. On page number 1, the news reads, Government unveils 2.1 lakh crore bank recapitalization plan. This news also appears as a continuation on page number 10 and a similar news appear on page number 13. So let's see all these news together. So this news appearing on page number 1, this on page number 10 and this one on page number 13. So let's understand this entire concept of recapitalization and this capital adequacy. So before starting the topic, let's understand certain basic points about recapitalization, why it is done and how does it help. Recapitalization basically means to infuse more capital or money into an institution or an organization. These funds which are infused in a mixture of debt or equity, that is either in terms of shares or in terms of bonds. So why is recapitalization done to any institution? So that the institution can function effectively without any operational blocks. And the main motive of recapitalization is to ensure that an institution has adequate capital or adequate money so that it can function and perform its day-to-day operations. Thus, capital adequacy is essential for any organization to run. In other words, financial requirement of any institution is of utmost importance. Now here the news is about recapitalization of banks. Broadly speaking, banks' function can be classified as either administrative and anything related to their business. When we say business, it means giving loans, taking money from depositors and such other functions which a bank does. Thus, bank requires money basically for these two functions. In the case of recapitalization, we generally see that there is an exchange of one form of financing to another. For example, replacing shares with bonds. Thus, recapitalization improves liquidity of an organization and helps them to conduct their operations smoothly. Now, I'm sure up till here, you must have understand the concept of recapitalization and why it is done to any institution. So with this respect, let us understand now what the news says. The news reads that the government has approved recapitalization plan of rupees 2.1 lakh crore for our public sector banks or PSBs. Now this recapitalization plan of 2.1 lakh crore has been categorized as rupees 80,000 crore as recapitalization bonds. Now here you can see that in the case of recapitalization, it is done through replacing shares with bonds or replacement of one form of finance with another. Thus 80,000 crore as recapitalization bonds and the rest, that is 8139 crore as budgetary support. All this money through recapitalization will help in improving the liquidity of the bank as well as in smooth conduct of their operation, including their day-to-day functions, which also includes giving loans. As we know that banks recently have been suffering from the non-performing assets or NPAs as we generally know it. So this recapitalization will also help in reducing the pressure which the banks currently have on their balance sheet because of these rising NPAs. Now let us understand another concept which appeared in the news on page number 13 with respect to capital adequacy ratio. Before going into mathematics of capital adequacy ratio, we have already seen that any institution requires a minimum amount of capital to perform their operations. Thus, this minimum capital with respect to the loan given by banks is generally termed as capital adequacy ratio. It is expressed as a percentage of bank's credit exposures. In other words, capital adequacy ratio of any bank simply tells us how financially stable a particular bank is. Now, why is a minimum capital adequacy required? To ensure banks have enough capital or cushion to absorb any amount of reasonable financial loss. Thus, an optimum capital adequacy ratio ensures efficiency and stability of the banks. Generally, capital adequacy ratio is also defined through Tier 1 and Tier 2 capital. As you may generally encounter these words, let us understand very simply what is Tier 1 and Tier 2 capital with respect to banks so that you can appreciate the entire concept of capital adequacy ratio and also understand how does recapitalization of any institution or for say bank helps the organization per se. Thus, Tier 1 capital is such capital which absorbs any financial loss without the bank stopping its operation or without the bank being winded up. Whereas tier 2 capital is such capital absorbs loss in the event of winding up of a bank. Thus, tier 2 generally provides a lesser degree of protection to the depositors and creditors. As you can see, it is very important for any bank to maintain a very good tier 1 capital. Thus, this is what is actually required from your UPSC point of view to understand the exact basics about bank recapitalization and how liquidity helps in performance of a bank. So in this topic, from your prelims point of view, this issue of recapitalization becomes very important, as a statement based question can be asked with respect to their nature, that is debt as well as equity. What is the effect of recapitalization and how does recapitalization helps to any institution? And this topic also becomes important from mains point of view, because we know banks have been going through this period of stress because of NPAs, and in our last DNS we also mentioned about the issue with respect to bond yields. So all these topics cumulatively becomes very important with respect to the financial stability and efficiency of banks in our country. Now we move on to our next news. Now we come to page number 7 and page number 13. On 7, this news is about SARAS, the Phoenix Rise Again, and 13 is about UDAN 2 or phase 2 of the UDAN scheme of regional connectivity. Let's see these news together so as to understand how can the use of SARAS can be related to the regional connectivity scheme. Let us understand the concept of SARAS. CSIR, that is Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, submitted a proposal with respect to spearheading small civilian aircraft design, development and manufacture to the then government of India in the year 2009. The government approved this particular proposal of CSIR. Now this proposal of CSIR was implemented by NAL, that is National Aerospace Laboratories, which is a constituent of CSIR. Thus, NAL started the development and manufacture of 2-seater Hansa aircraft and 14-seater SARAS aircraft. However, this project was scrapped in March 2009 as SARAS met with an accident, or it was crashed during one of its test flights. Now in 2018, since the regional connectivity scheme of UDAN is in place, hence the government has decided to test fly SARAS all over again. As we have seen, as it is a 14-seater light transport aircraft and it can be used effectively in regional connectivity in the UDAN scheme. So with this respect, SARAS was test flighted from Indian Air Force's Aircraft and Systems Testing Establishment, that is ASTE. The primary objective of this test flights is to evaluate system performance in certain number of flights and then collect the data with respect to such test flights so that such data can be used in the final design and manufacture of the upgraded SARAS aircraft. Thus this topic becomes important in science and tech, as questions can be asked with respect to SARAS, whether it is a civilian aircraft or a military aircraft. With respect to its production, it is being designed and manufactured by the NAL or National Aerospace Laboratories, and NAL is a part of which institution? So the answer would be CSIR or Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. Thus these becomes basic prelims question which can be asked with respect to SARAS. Now let's move to the UDAN 2 scheme. As we know that a regional connectivity scheme named as UDAN or Ure Desh Ka Aam Nagrik has already been in place. So the government has come up with the phase 2 of UDAN scheme. Let us see what the scheme is. So under this phase 2, 73 underserved or unserved airports or helipads will be introduced into the UDAN scheme. Thus the government intends to penetrate regional connectivity. The states which will see maximum number of activation of airports are Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, Assam and Manipur. As you can see, it will help in regional connectivity. In this respect, the Ministry of Finance has agreed to fund the phase 2 of UDAN scheme through the dividend which is paid by the Airports Authority of India through the Government of India every year. Thus, the government is keen to increase regional connectivity by starting phase 2 of the UDAN scheme. In this respect, let us understand two concepts: viability gap funding as well as regional connectivity fund. In this, fares of 1 hour flight has been capped at rupees 2,500 and taxes has been kept very low for this particular flight. Now suppose if the airline's cost exceeds this rupees 2,500, then the government will pay the difference from airlines operating on profitable routes. This concept of paying the difference by the government is known as viability gap funding. For example, let us understand the government has capped the price at rupees 2500. However, the cost comes to around 3200. So the extra rupees 700 will be paid by the government of India to such airlines. This rupees 700 paid extra by the government becomes the viability gap funding. In this respect, a regional connectivity fund or RCF shall be constituted to meet the viability gap funding. In this respect, the state governments shall contribute 20% of the fund. However, the northeastern states shall contribute only 10% of the fund. How will UDAN help? Obviously, it will help in the regional connectivity or improving regional connectivity across India. It will also give a boost to tourism sector, which will effectively help in creation of employment and also help the growth of airlines to operate across regions. Thus, these two news becomes very important. And the news of UDAN, it is important to understand the concept of viability gap funding, as you can use these concepts to write an answer in the mains as to how the concept of UDAN effectively helps India in its growth and development. With respect to prelims, any question with respect to UDAN can be asked. Thus, we see these two news together becomes important as India is developing SARAS as a 14-seater civil passenger aircraft. It can also be used for regional connectivity across India. Thus, this news become very important. Now let's move to the next news. Now on the same page, that is page number 7, the news reads HPV vaccine gets immunization nod. So in this, the NTAG or the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization has given its approval for the use of HPV vaccine. What is HPV? Human papilloma virus. NTAG is and it recommends Ministry of Health and Family Welfare about the various vaccines to be used in India's universal immunization program. However, there was issue with respect to this vaccine of HPV. Let us understand what the issue was. The Ministry of Health had earlier dropped the HPV vaccine from the immunization program due to certain issues with respect to clinical trials. Some times back, around 24,000 adolescent girls were given this HPV vaccine. After taking this particular vaccine, some of the girls died. This instance led to a filing of writ petition in the Supreme Court in the year 2012, and in this respect, the verdict of the Supreme Court is still awaited. However, the World Health Organization and Global Advisory Committee has recommended the use of HPV vaccine. Now, what is this HPV or human papilloma virus and why vaccination becomes so important at an early stage? So let us understand certain facts about the HPV or human papilloma virus. As you can see, the HPV is a group of viruses that are extremely common worldwide, and there are more than 100 types of HPV virus, of which at least 13 are cancer causing, also known as a high risk type. Thus, this HPV is a very common group of virus and affects most of the individuals. Now, how it is affected? HPV is mainly transmitted through sexual contact, and cervical cancer is one of the major effects of this HPV virus, as it is transmitted sexually. And in this respect, it is important to understand that two HPV types, or type 16 and type 18, cause roughly 70% of cervical cancers around the world and precancerous cervical lesions. So, immunization with respect to human papilloma virus becomes an important topic. So, questions directly in the prelims as well as mains can be asked with respect to human papilloma virus, its effects, and how it is caused. Thus, this topic becomes important. Let's move on to the next news. Now we move on to page number 8. Here, the news is about ASEAN, the arc to Southeast Asia, and this news on page number 10 talks about New Delhi brims with Look East vibes. Now, as we know that on 26 January, that is our Republic Day, head of states of 10 ASEAN nations will be there to celebrate our Republic Day. So in this respect, let us understand certain facts with respect to ASEAN. So in this India-ASEAN Commemorative Summit, we are celebrating 25 years of sectoral partnership, and we are tracing this partnership since the year 1992. Similarly, we are celebrating 15 years of summit partnership, and this we have been tracing since the year 2002, and 5 years of strategic partnership from the year 2012. Now in this ASEAN meeting, India will sign the Delhi Declaration of 2018. And the topics on which Delhi declarations is supposed to be signed are maritime cooperation and security, freedom of navigation, countering piracy, cyber security, combating terrorism, and celebrating three C's, that is connectivity, commerce, and culture. India, through the Delhi Declaration, is trying to go forward with its Look East policy as it wants to increase trade and commerce in the entire Southeast Asian region. There are also certain important issues on which we'll have a talk. But let's see, as this news is in transition, whether they agree to sign any documentation or not on these particular topics. And these are Rohingya issue, RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and Belt Road Initiative. Thus, these three are controversial issues, and we need to wait and watch what are the issues on which India, along with ASEAN, signs their Delhi Declaration. Thus, this topic becomes important from prelims point of view, as these particular facts becomes very important as we are celebrating 25 years of sectoral partnership, 15 years of summit partnership, and 5 years of strategic partnership. India is also trying to increase trade with the Southeast Asian region. With this, we move on to the next news. Now on page number 9, there's this data point which says pollution spike in India. This basically gives India's Environmental Performance Index ranking for 2018, and you can see that India's rank has dropped from 141 to 177, and this 177 is out of 180 countries, showing that India has actually deteriorated environmental indicators. Now these metrics provide a gauge at a national scale and sees and measures how close countries are to their established environmental policy goals. EPI, that is Environment Performance Index, is produced jointly by Yale and Columbia University in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. Thus, this particular news becomes important from your prelims point of view, and also that Switzerland is the top scoring country. This becomes an important news from your prelims point of view. With this, we come to an end to today's DNS. Let's move on to the question for the day.